LeaderCast.
Hi, and welcome to Deep Leadership. I'm your host, John Rennie. Well, I hope all is well with you today. It is Sunday afternoon, and I'm drinking a hot cup of Bottom Gun coffee from my friends at bottomguncoffee.com. I have another great show lined up for you, but before we get started, I just wanted to mention my new book. It's called You Have the Watch, a guided journal to become a leader worth following. This is a guided journal for leaders that will walk you through an entire year of leadership training. There are 50 themes in the book, and each day you will reflect on a different facet of that theme. This journal is designed to be on your desk at work for you to read and reflect on for about 15 minutes each morning. Leadership skills are just like any other skills. You need to practice them to get better at them. And this journal helps leaders practice those critical skills. So if you're interested in learning more about and pre-ordering this guided journal, go to youhavethewatch.com, and every book pre-ordered before March 31st enters you into a giveaway. Now, we have a grand prize in this giveaway. It's a hand-carved wooden American flag from the Sasquatch Flag Company. And we also have other prizes like a Ruck Case Humidor from the Warfighter Tobacco Company, a $50 gift box from the Sheepdog Soap Company, a $50 gift card to Chin Up Chest Out Apparel, another $50 gift card to Forebear Clothing Company. We've got 5 winners who will take away a pound of coffee from Bottom Gun Coffee, and we have 2 winners who will get an opportunity to get the White Arrow by my friend Noble Brown. So get your pre-orders in before March 31st if you want to take advantage of this special offer. And again, you go to youhavethewatch.com to get that pre-order in. Now, if you're looking to support what I'm doing on the show, you can purchase any one of my books at johnsrennie.com, and podcast listeners can use the discount code DEEP at checkout to get additional savings. Well, that is it. Today, my guest is Bill Ringle. Bill is a business growth expert. As CEO of LearnWell, he helps business leaders find ways to take their businesses to the next level. This was a powerful conversation about the critical role that leaders play in business growth. Now, every leader who is looking to grow their top and bottom lines needs to listen to this episode. So, are you ready to dive in? Let's get started.
Welcome to Deep Leadership. Leadership is a people business. That's the philosophy of your podcast host, John Rennie. As a former Cold War submarine officer who spent 20 plus years leading businesses in corporate America before starting his own manufacturing business, he knows that leadership matters. Are you ready for some real-world actionable advice from John as well as his expert guests?
I'm ready.
The show starts right now.
Welcome to the Deep Leadership Podcast. Today I'm joined by Bill Ringle. Bill is CEO of LearnWell and author of the upcoming book, Grow Business Now. He is a nationally known business growth strategy expert. He's also a CEO coach, speaker, author, and angel investor based out of Philadelphia. He is the host of the Top 50 Business podcast, My Quest for the Best. Now, this is a show for ambitious small business leaders, and he's had guests on like Mark Victor Hansen of the Chicken Soup for the Soul series, Barbara Corcoran of Shark Tank, and New York Times bestselling author Dan Pink. He's also had more than 350 other top published experts on his show. In fact, I was honored to be interviewed by him, and it'll be appearing on a future episode. But I'm excited to have him on the show to talk about the role of leaders in business growth. So, Bill, welcome to the show.
It's a pleasure to be with you, John.
It's great to have you, and it was fun being on your show. And I'm really glad that you were able to take the time to come and visit us, because I wanted to talk about the subject of business growth, because that seems to be an area where you have a lot of expertise. So maybe you start off by telling us a little bit about how did you get into the role of, or find yourself helping businesses with business growth?
My background is varied. It was never a straight path to go from point A to point B. I didn't start in a small company and say, well, someday I'm going to be a manager, then a director, then a vice president, then a CEO. I always found myself in conversations with people and being able to offer insights. When I was a teacher, the headmaster and the business manager would always pull me into conversations and task me with special projects. When I worked in universities, I became someone who the president had on direct dial to be able to run ideas by and ask questions. When I worked at corporations, I worked for Apple. I was someone who I was pulled into meetings and asked to join teams that were outside my job description because I found it very easy to talk to people and ask questions. It's not that I always knew the right answers, but I knew that when there was something that wasn't sufficiently being probed or asked, I would be the one to ask the question. I would blunder in, ask the questions, and it would result in something being better. I remember one time at Apple, I liked making up new names for things. And my area of responsibility was going nationally. I was international program manager for worldwide training at Apple. And I remember one time thinking that the server bundle that we were offering needed a better positioning statement. So I started asking people about what they were doing with it. I started asking customers, asked the internal product team. And I finally said to them one point, I said, you know what we need to do? We need to get this Apple Internet server system online. And then I looked at them and I thought, did you just hear what I said? And I said, we need to get our AISS online. And they started laughing because of the acronym. And that became very popular. We had it on T-shirts and buttons and hats, and customers thought it was funny too. It was just a funny little perspective that breaks through the clutter and leads to better results. And that's what I found myself doing was, as I was asked to do different venture capital presentations, I was able to assist the leaders in better positioning their companies. I was able to help them identify market niches where their technology might be more valuable, and as a result, get a higher valuation when they went through the process with their investors. So I always found myself drawn into those conversations. So finally, I said, let me lean into it and look to help people more intentionally and directly that way.
Well, that's interesting. So where do you think that came from? The ability to just sort of see the forest through the trees, maybe, or to be able to find those unique opportunities, if you will.
See, I'm the worst person to ask that question to because I think everyone can do it. I think that everyone naturally thinks this way.
Well, that's fascinating. Now you've got a company, LearnWell. What are the type of companies that you work with? What are the things that you offer for services, and what's your unique value proposition to those clients?
So we serve the private, small, and mid-sized business market, and I tend to focus on high technology companies. They could be in internet publishing, they could be in software development, they could be services companies. Or they could even be, research companies that have a high degree of technology involved. And I could develop rapport with the senior management team pretty quickly and help them assess what steps are needed in order to mitigate disasters or take advantage of opportunities faster. I always look at the way that businesses are structured and see what's working and how we could take it up a level or two. So, for instance, you work with, you studied with nuclear submarines, as I recall.
Yes.
Not currently, but that was something that was part of your background.
Yes.
One of my favorite nuclear subparticles is the Higgs boson particle. And remember, that's the subatomic particle that gives attributes, the attribute of mass to other atoms. And what my company does is it gives companies and helps introduce these qualities and characteristics, habits and routines that make everything else function better. It helps people improve their communication, hold each other more accountable. I have an acronym. I'm a former tennis coach. Remember, I said this is never direct, but so I'm always thinking in terms of the vocabulary of sports and how that can relate to people. And I use the ACE acronym now, talk about what people need is to be able to think about alignment, clarity, and execution in order to become an ACE company. And you need ACE managers, people who have the skills to do that. And you've hired lots of people too, John. You know that if you listen to somebody delegate a task to someone else and they don't tell them when it's due by or how they're going to evaluate success, you might be there to say, you know what, let's enrich that conversation a little bit. Well, that's what I do is I help people on a large scale learn to enrich their conversations, to add those tools in to help in the areas of alignment, clarity, and execution.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, we talk a lot on the show that, leadership is about, motivating people to accomplish a task, right? And so when you talk about alignment, you're talking about getting everybody on the same page, focused on whatever the task is, clarifying the goal, if you will. And then it's about getting people motivated to execute on whatever that action is. And, it's funny, it seems straightforward, but it seems to be a thing that's missing in a lot of companies, right? So everybody's working on emails, or they're working on landing a big customer account, or they're trying to reduce scrap, and everybody's working in different areas and not necessarily focused on one goal or one mission for the organization. Everybody's out doing their own thing. So I think alignment's a big part of that, and being very clear with what we are going to accomplish as a company. And I see a lot of, especially when I worked in corporate, I spent 22 years in large corporations, and the goal was sometimes often not clear. It was murky at best. Every department had their own goals, but what were we trying to do as a big company was hard to understand. And the way
that you just moved your hands made me think how often people have goals that don't line up and support larger goals of the organization.
Right.
And one of the things that I say is that everyone in your company ought to know that what steps they're taking today are helping you advance your business in measurable ways to make a stronger business by the end of the week, the end of the month, the end of the quarter. And if you can't answer that with clarity, then that's an area that we need to focus on until people can see that every action they take, whether they spend half an hour first thing in the morning reviewing what their top priorities are, or whether they let email dictate their priorities for the morning. Yeah. And let me just share with all your listeners right now, if you could put off checking email and you set up your culture so that people don't expect to send messages to each other via email or respond to email throughout the day, your productivity will increase dramatically by 10 to 20% within the first week. And it doesn't mean you don't communicate with each other. You may have a separate project management board. You may have something in, say, Asana or Trello, or something else that's focused around specific tasks and assignments that we've worked on and agreed to already, rather than being at the whim of whatever messages happen to arrive that day and be sitting at the top of your inbox. I think email is one of the biggest time wasters because it's not being used the way that it was intended to be used originally.
Yeah, no, that's, we tend to do what's urgent and not important, right? And also because there's a comfort zone in, I'm going to bang out my emails and get to email zero, right? There's this sort of, it's like a false sense of accomplishment. I cleared my inbox, right? Well, great. Your company's losing 10% profit, right? Shouldn't you be working on that first, right? So,
or that customer's waiting to hear back from you so they could place the big order. Nope, their email was not in my top 20, and then I had to go to lunch.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah, definitely. We do that a lot, and we tend to, work on what's in the now and what's comfortable versus what we really need to do. That's a big part of it. I agree. So,
and it's really taking your own direction. And that's what I mean when you really step up to leadership. You need to set your own direction, your own course. What are the big priorities for the day, the week, the month? And how are the actions and decisions that you're making moment to moment contributing to that? That's what I want people to be asking themselves on a regular basis. So it just becomes a background question that's always in your mind.
I love it. That's great. You work with small businesses. You see the same statistics I see. Why do so many small businesses fail to grow? They sort of get stuck at certain levels and they have a hard time breaking through. What are some of the reasons for that?
Well, I was just going to say there are a lot of different reasons for that. Let me point to some of the larger and more common ones. One is that the vision of the people leading doesn't really lend itself to scaling a company. If that leader wants to be involved in too many decisions and becomes a bottleneck, that will throttle the growth of a company. Mm-hmm. Another way of doing that is a way of stunting your own growth is to make sure that when you hire, you're only hiring people for specific present needs rather than hiring them with room to grow. And then also, I think a third reason that I think is very common is just a lack of risk taking. People saying, I've worked with leaders. I remember one leader whose name was Paul. He didn't want to borrow money. He thought it was risky to borrow money, yet he wanted to make investments. And he said, well, I'll do that when we've accumulated enough profit. Well, that was a 3-year proposition where it could have been a 60-day proposition.
Yeah. No, it's a big. You're right. Risk taking is a tough thing, especially when you're going all in. This is your business, and you put a lot of personal money into it. You want it to be successful, and you're trying to make the best decisions. I know when I came from being 22 years working for other companies and making decisions with other people's money, it was a lot, I would say, easier than being a small business owner and making decisions with my own personal money. It suddenly became real, right? Because this is not some corporate bank account. This is my bank account, So things really do change. And so risk is, for those who are listening and thinking, I want to be an entrepreneur, great, do it. But just recognize that the risks are much more significant when you're all in with your own personal capital.
So I've had businesses of my own for 25 years, and I've had side hustles even when I was working for other companies. The day it became really real for me was the day that I did not pay attention to collecting. I had, like $150,000 that was still in receivables, and we came to the end of the month, and I had to transfer money from my own savings to cover payroll. Yes. And that's a moment that I think everyone who's a founder and a business leader can remember very, very clearly. It's like, I've done this is how it works.
Yes, I have definitely done it. I've been there. It's just, like cash, just the cash flow timing, right? You're just like, well, wait, payroll's today, and I'm still waiting for this big check to clear. And all right, well, it's coming from my personal account. And
and I'm sure I remember too stomping up and down and saying, why did they wait 60 days to pay? I don't get it.
Right, exactly. Well, it's your fault. It's our fault for not paying attention to the numbers and the details. So one tip, business owners listening in, I have one person that's full-time just working on collecting cash. So she is a true asset to my business. So I encourage you to do the same. So make sure you're keeping track of those AR numbers. So that's great. So, one of the things I'm interested in, you're a growth expert, and this is a leadership podcast. So I kind of want to get back to a little bit of what is the leader's role in driving growth? You mentioned one that's really, really important. And I see this happen a lot where, especially with small business owners trying to get to that next level, is they try to control too much. And like you said, they throttle the decision-making down to them, and you can't move as fast. So everything slows down waiting for the owner or the boss to make the decision. So, but what are the other things that the leader needs to do to be able to grow their business?
So I'm going to go back to another point that I mentioned, which is hiring people that bring more capabilities to the company than you initially need them for. You grow by hiring people that are brighter, smarter, and more energetic than the current people, so that the average of the group goes up with each hire. And I know that people listening to this now is saying, well, there's not a lot of talent out there, but we really needed a person in. And I encourage you to communicate the need through your job description with such a level of specificity and excitement about the opportunity that you need to take the risk of repelling people who would be adding to the number of candidates and attracting the person who says, oh, I want that responsibility. Let me take a little bit of a diversion to give some more context here. As a prep school teacher, where I was completely responsible for what I taught so long as I would make it to the end of the book at the end of the year. I had complete autonomy in that class. I loved the responsibility of that. And it was one of the great preparations for being an entrepreneur. I actually came across a statistic that if you look at the previous careers of the most successful entrepreneurs, the most frequent previous career of a successful entrepreneur is that of a teacher. Mm. And that doesn't surprise me. The organization, the being able to relate to people, be able to get them to get the assignments done, those are a lot of skills that you work on as a teacher. Now, I've taught at high school level, college level, grad school, professional education, a lot of different levels. So I know how to speak to a lot of different audiences that way. When you're looking to grow, you've got to be able to model the same way that you think of it when you were a junior executive or a manager in another company. You and I were both in larger companies, and we would always be the ones looking to people in the room and say, they're the ones leading. I remember being in meetings at Apple, and I remember being at other meetings within universities and saying, those are the people who are leading, and I'm watching them. Guess what? We're the ones that our employees are watching today. And everything we do, how prepared we are when we show up for a meeting, how we start on time, all these little things are being observed and digested as part of our company culture. And we've got to be sure to take responsibility for that. One of the things that leaders do is we acknowledge that we are 100% responsible for everything in our environment.
Yes.
If people are turning in reports late, part of that is because we let them. We allow that to be okay.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, 100%. I always say that, our maximum employee behavior is going to be what our minimum acceptable level of performance is. So if we say, well, late reports are okay, you're going to get late reports. It's going to be just part of the culture. It's going to be part of the way we do business. And I think, so we signal what our priorities are based on our actions, not necessarily by the words we say. And I think you hit the nail on the head is that we are on stage 24/7, and every little thing we do is being observed, probably even more than the words we say. They look at the actions that we take and what our priorities are throughout our day and what's important to us and what's not important to us. All that is signaling the direction of the company, the direction of the boss. So, some people say, well, I don't want to be on stage. I don't want people be watching me every move I make. Well, then don't go into leadership, because leadership is all about being on stage and being that person that everyone's looking at.
We'll be right back after a quick word from our sponsors.
One ping only, please. As I thought, John Rennie's new book, All in the Same Boat, is right over there. It's at allinthesameboatbook.com. Your orders are to get there now. And remember, be careful what you shoot at. Most things in here don't react too well to bullets.
Is your boss a jerk? I understand you're in the hospital, but I'm going to need you to come in today. Do they lack any ability to actually lead people? Oh, it's fine. I'll just find somebody else that can do it, okay? John is offering a new service just for you. For only $10, he will anonymously mail a copy of his best-selling book, I Have the Watch, to your boss with a personal note. Go to IHaveTheWatch.com and enter the discount code BOSS at checkout.
Yeah. Now, wasn't this true just even a couple of years ago when we first started all meeting from work from home? And I remember managers saying, I don't want to turn my camera on because I'm not happy with what the background looks like. Yeah. And I said, what if you just turn the camera 90 degrees? They don't have to look into your living room, have it point to a wall. Mm-hmm. And they were like, oh my gosh, I could do that. But it's important to be on camera when you're having a group meeting. It's important to be visible, when we're meeting face to face. These are things that matter in every size business. And we all need to be aware of that so that we're helping facilitate and develop that level of the culture.
Yeah, I agree. That's great. You mentioned this, and I was just a quick question for you. What does it mean to develop leadership? I like that expression.
It's something that we all have. It's a responsibility of the leaders to think about the next level of bench strength. It's sure, you could get the job done by having Mike do it because Mike's done it 100 times before. What about if you let Mike mentor Patty and say, Mike, who on your team, could do this? And he says, well, Patty's probably going to be able to do it soon. And then you say, well, Mike, what would it mean to just mentor her, to coach her to do it? And he says, well, it would take too long. And I say, it might take too long the first time, but how could you prepare her so that you could still meet it? He goes, oh, well, I'd have to start sooner. Oh, okay. And then you'd be able to take a vacation, wouldn't you, Mike? You always have to bring it back to what's the benefit. Because if you're indispensable in an organization, you never can get sick. You never can take a vacation.
Yeah, that's critical. Absolutely. And I think you're right. And I think one of the things I saw, at least in corporate, is that we give our difficult tasks to our most senior people, and because we want it, we don't have any time for failure. We don't have any time for anything going wrong. And so the young people, the new people, the people that want to be challenged, that want to have the opportunities, are never given those opportunities to grow. So I like what you said. Hey, Mike, let's mentor Patty. Let's give her a chance to do one of these difficult tasks at some point, because people want to be able to step up. They want to show that they can add value. And if we just ignore them and don't give them those opportunities, then they're going to look for other opportunities or places to go where they will be challenged. Employees do like to be challenged. I know it sounds funny, but they do like to be challenged, and they love to contribute to the growth of the company, the success of the company.
Let's deepen that a little bit more, John, because we're talking to business leaders, and we've all got people on our teams who are younger than us, who might be in their 20s or 30s. They thrive on adding to their skill sets. And if you want people to hang around, you don't want to say, I'm going to give you less responsibility. The reason they're working for a small or mid-sized business rather than an enterprise is because of the opportunity, because they could be involved in projects and client meetings earlier in their career than if they were in an enterprise.
Yep. I really like that. That's really important. Everyone's listening in. I mean, there are people that are in your business because they want to develop some skill or have some special experience that they're part of your team. So give them those experiences. Otherwise, they're going to go somewhere else to find those experiences. So yeah, I love that. That's really, really important. And it's exactly what I've seen with my company, which is only 6 years old. I've seen people come to us because they see there's a great opportunity to do something they couldn't do at a big company. So, and develop some interesting skill sets. So yeah, don't lose sight on that. Especially sometimes we think small business owners, well, I don't have as much to offer as a big company. Actually, you probably have more to offer than a big company, because you get a chance for employees to see the big picture, everything from sales to marketing to engineering to product development. You see it all in a small company, which is great. And you don't see that in a big company. You're kind of in one department, or you're one kind of functional area, right? But here you get to see a bigger picture. So yeah.
Let's also point out to the managers listening, saying, don't wait to think that your junior colleague who's in his or her 20s is going to say, I would like more responsibility. Yeah. First of all, they'll respond to a text faster than a conversation like that. Second of all, they can't necessarily articulate it, but watch how they respond. Watch the energy that they bring to a new excitement, a new assignment that encourages them, causes them, demands that they stretch a little bit in order to rise to that level. There's where you'll see the energy and potential of that team member.
Yeah, that's great. I love it. You have said that leaders need to develop a no excuses mindset. Now, what is that, and why is it so important?
Well, we could sit around, if the business is not going the way that we want and we're not having the sales that we want, we could find excuses to agree on, and just it's a hard market. People aren't answering the phone anymore. We don't have the networking opportunities we used to. And we could completely justify our lack of success in any area. However, when I come into conversations, I say, well, let's listen to that for a little bit. And now that it's on the table, let's put it aside and say, what if we took 100% responsibility for it? Yeah. And then they start to say, well, if we did that, then maybe we'd have to develop new ways of reaching prospective customers. And then I simply say, Well, what would that look like? Well, we'd have to proactively call them. And I say, well, what would make that easier? Well, making a list in advance. I said, well, you could do that, couldn't you? Well, yeah, no one's ever put it to me like that before. And it's just helping people take responsibility to achieve the results that we've already agreed to, but without the blame, without the giving up responsibility. Because that's really what happens. Whenever we blame someone or we blame external circumstances, we're actually taking a piece of our power and handing it over. Oh, I really don't want to take responsibility for this, so I'm going to put the blame over there.
Right.
We really, once we start to take 100% responsibility as just a fundamental starting point, everything changes.
Yes, I love it. You say that habits are important as well. So what are one or two key habits that you've seen? You've met with a lot of people on your podcast. You've worked with a lot of really interesting people. What are one or two key habits that high performers put in their day that they do on a regular basis that we could all learn from?
So I would say that the one thing that stands out the most during the past couple of years are people who develop the habit of saying, I'm someone who could learn. I'm not just, come in with a fixed skill set, but I can learn. It's the attitude of being open to learning. And Carol Dweck has talked about this extensively in being growth-minded versus closed-minded. That's one of the things that impresses upon me the most, is when somebody has the attitude of being able to grow and adapt to the circumstances. The other thing is that a lot of the habits, you don't want to look for the new and unusual in an area that's so well covered. Go back and read or reread the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
Yeah.
I make sure all my clients are very versatile and skilled and conversant in the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. Not because he was amazing in writing these ideas or coming up with them. He wrote a great summary and added some great stories and put them into this framework that works really, really well. If you want to boost your company, start reading that and discuss a chapter a week in order to make sure people are really using it effectively.
That's great. That's great. Great book. And I think it's a great recommendation. Absolutely.
Isn't that funny? Everyone who I mentioned that title to, I've never, ever, ever had somebody say, oh, I didn't get a lot out of that book. It was always, no. That's a great book. Everyone remembers reading that book.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. No, and these are, like even, like a book like The 1 Minute Manager, which is old now, it's been around a long time, but man, there's some really great nuggets of wisdom in these books that book sold 23 million copies. There's something special about that book. It's a small book, easy to read. And don't think that it's because it was written 20 plus years ago that it's still not effective today. Same thing with 7 Habits. That is still, if you look on Amazon, it's still one of the best-selling leadership books today. And it was written, I don't know how many years ago, but it's still in that top 50 category all the time because I'm always looking.
Yeah, that's right. Especially as authors, we're always looking at what the bestseller
Where do I
fall?
So
let me point out that when everyone listening goes to talk about one of the 7 habits, say, be proactive. You want to say, be proactive because this is how I find that I'm at my most effective. I start my day and I think about what I want my day to contain, people I want to contribute to, the projects I want to advance, how I want to make a contribution and deepen the relationships that I have at work, at home, and my friends. I'm always thinking of how I'm going to prank my friends, just do fun things. Say from your personal experience, it's important. You're never going to get the same amount of authority by saying you should follow, be proactive, start with the end in mind, begin with the end in mind, put first things first, because Stephen Covey said it, or It was a best-selling book. Do it from your own personal authority, and you get so much more out of it.
Yeah, that's great. Perfect. I love it. Tell us a little bit about your podcast, My Quest for the Best. It's a top 50 business podcast. Who is it for? What are the kind of guests that you have on the show?
So I'm really pleased that I have 350 something podcast episodes out there. over 80-something% of the podcasts that start, even though there are like 2 million podcasts now, over 80% never get past their 20th episode. So when people can get over that 20th episode, you've suddenly discovered a system, you've developed a routine, you've clarified your audience. There are a whole bunch of things that come together once you've gotten to episode 25 or 30. And I'm sure you've recognized that as well. You're in that club, John. You know, it's like being the 5th time hosting Saturday Night Live. We've got the jackets.
Right.
And people who I have on my podcast, I was very clear right from the beginning that I wanted to have on published authors, because then I could read their book in advance, come up with good questions, and find ways to make their expertise relevant to my audience. And believe me, like every podcast host, I knew my audience intimately when I first began, because I could have them all sit in my living room.
Yes,
it starts out very small, and you say, now, what did you think of this one? And I would hold my own focus groups to find out what they thought. And even today, if somebody writes in, first of all, we make sure that when people leave a comment, the first person to leave a comment and send it in for the week, we send them a book, and then we draw at the end of each week and send them a book of one of the guests that we've interviewed, because it's a way of building that relationship. And then when they write and say thank you, I say, hey, let's chat. What did you really like about the show? And I find out so much through those conversations.
That's great. Yeah, no, that's really good to seek feedback, and that's the same thing with our businesses, right? The only way we're going to get better is to seek feedback and look for ways that we can get better. So I like the idea of interacting with your audience and finding ways that you can serve them better, and finding the things that they like about the shows. I think that's a really good piece of advice. That's great. And the show has grown tremendously. How long have you been running the show for now?
So it's probably been about 10 years, but only about 3 years ago did I say, I'm going to step it up and make it a weekly show. Before it was once a month, and I'd have a couple episodes ready. Now I am 3 months in advance with the episodes that I'm recording today, so that I can take a vacation, so that I can say at the end of a season, we're going to take a little break and give my team a chance to look at our SOPs and review those and work the process.
That's fantastic. Great advice. You've got a new book coming out. I just want to mention it real quick. And it's called Grow a Business Now, Follow the Path to Proven Market Reach, Creating Superior Products Rapidly without Delegation Headaches. So tell us a little bit about what the book's going to be about.
Hopefully the subtitle says a lot about it. How to grow your market share, and how to do it profitably, and to do it without headaches. Because this is one of the things that business leaders, managers come to me all the time and say, Bill, they're not doing what I'm telling them to do. And I say, are you really telling them? Show me what it's like when you've delegated. And there are a lot of checklists that I use. And I say, here's how to become stronger at delegating. And I've developed a little quiz around it so that people realize people pretty much learn to delegate based upon our experience of our managers delegating to us and our bosses as we've grown up. And people will fall into a type that maybe sometimes they're mind readers, and they want their staff to work to anticipate that. And it's such a wasteful. That's just one of the 5 types of delegation styles that I've found. But let me just say this, that if you're a mind reader and you always, you tell people a little bit, but you want them to guess the rest or divine it somehow, it's a tremendous waste of energy. They're working so much harder to figure out what you want than if you just simply expressed it to them. Let me share an example to you. One of the phrases that I listen for when I sit in on executive meetings, project meetings, and I listen just as an observer so that I can coach the executive team more effectively. And if I hear somebody say, I'd like you to review this and get back to me, that sounds like a really reasonable request, when it's actually a horrible request. Because when you say, I'd like feedback on that, you really don't know what to read for. You really don't know, are you looking for grammar and flow to the proposal? Let's say it's a proposal. Or are you really looking for ways to expand it and to strengthen it? Are you looking for the fit? There are just so many questions that aren't answered by a simple request like that. And it happens over and over again in businesses, day in and day out.
Yep.
So I say to people, really be clear about what you're asking for and say to them, I want you to look at this for no more than an hour. And when we come back and meet about it, I want you to talk with me about whether you think this scenario works to solidify this point. Or maybe you just say, go over it and then send me a message or leave me something in the Google Doc saying that you've reviewed it and that it will meet the requirements based upon your reading of them, if that's their responsibility. Be super, super clear and also specify, I don't want you spending any more than an hour on this or maybe 2 days to do the research and come back, but be really clear as to what it is you're asking someone to do, because you might have a young employee on there, someone not with a lot of experience, who's looking to impress you, and maybe all you want to do is know whether you like the angle that they've been photographed in for a product, and they go through and do 2 weeks of research that energy and time and talent could have been spent in a more productive capacity.
Yeah,
that's actually happened. Happened.
Yeah, it's a chapter of my book, my latest book, about being clear with communication. So there's nothing worse than an employee completing a project that they thought they did correctly and find out they did exactly the wrong thing. It's frustrating for the employee, it's frustrating for the boss. So being clear up front, it will save you a lot, and following it up early on is a lot better than just waiting to the last minute or waiting to the end and find out you did something wrong. That's very frustrating. So yeah.
And let me add to that, John, because people listening to this now may think that conditions haven't changed, and yet they have. We used to always jokingly say, well, you can't go in the printer room because someone's printing off resumes because they're looking for new jobs. It's not that obvious now. Yeah. People could be asked, if they're interested in pursuing jobs. And if they've had a recent experience or even just a memorable bad experience in the last few months of being asked to do something with bad parameters around it or bad support or bad feedback in order to feel successful, like they're making progress and developing in their career with your company, they have opportunities at their fingertips and you'd never know. So keep that in mind, always that you're in competition to maintain your talent and bring the culture, make it a priority to improve how you communicate with people, delegate, assign responsibility, provide feedback and support people so that they know that they're contributing in meaningful ways every single week. Don't let a week go by without that kind of conversation.
Yeah, that's so true. Absolutely. So, and you mentioned the book will be out later this year. Is that correct?
Yes, I anticipate it being out later this year in 2022.
Excellent. That's great. So now where can listeners go to learn more about you and find out more about your business growth insights and learn how to become better leaders? Where can they go?
So first thing I'd do is encourage them to connect with me on LinkedIn. Look for Bill Ringle. You'll find me there. Second of all, subscribe to the podcast, My Quest for the Best. It's the podcast for ambitious small business leaders, and there's so many great episodes there. If you have questions about which ones to listen to, let me know. I'd love to make a personal recommendation. And third, just for your listeners, John, I've set up a special page. If you go to growbusinessnow.com/deep leadership, include that in the show notes. Yep. We have a special page set up with tips about how to be a more effective leader.
That's fantastic, and we'll put links in the show notes for those 3 resources. And I really highly encourage you to look up My Quest for the Best podcast. It's a great podcast, and we'll be talking about a lot when my show gets aired. And so I really highly encourage you to look at these resources. I think that we've learned some really good things, and I really appreciate, Bill, you being on the show and sharing really a lot of insight towards business growth and really leadership. And I really appreciate you being on the show.
It's part of all of our responsibilities, no matter what our title is in a business, John. And it's such a pleasure to talk with you because you bring your experience and perspective that gives it such a great fit for everyone listening. So thanks again for having me.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Well, that's it for today. Thank you for listening to Deep Leadership. If you like this podcast, please subscribe and share so we can continue to build a world with better bosses. Until next time, this is John Rennie saying take care and lead well.
Thank you for listening to Deep Leadership.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you for all you do.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode. For more information and updates, please visit our website at www.deepleadershippodcast.com or johnsrennie.com. Until next time, take care.
Hey there, I'm DC. I host the Rock Podcast, Back to the Arena, The Interviews. It's about a 30-minute podcast where I talk one-on-one with a band who has released new music. You can find us on all the best podcast sites like Spotify, Apple, Google, iHeartRadio, and more. If you're a rock fan like me, subscribe today to Back to the Arena, The Interviews.
Electricast.
Miles, are you ready to record our promo for Season 2 of the Wanna Bet podcast?
David, have you ever seen a grown man naked?
Miles, we're not here to quote lines from Airplane. We're here to tell people that Season 2 starts August 18th.
But I like Airplane.
I know you do, but Wanna Bet is a sports betting podcast. Each week we bet $1,000 on the NFL teams and games that we love.
Well, that sounds like fun.
It is fun. And last year you picked over 60% of your games correctly.
How'd you do?
We're not talking about that. We are telling people that they can find us every Friday. So no more movie quotes.
Roger.
Electricast.